Before dawn, Nashville woke to chaos. Helicopters circled low, sirens cut through the dark, and doors were kicked open as federal agents swarmed the city. By sunrise, an operation unlike anything locals had ever seen was underway. Streets were blocked, suspects were dragged out in handcuffs, and entire neighborhoods watched in shock. Officials stayed tight-lipped, but one thing was clear. This was no routine bust. Something massive had been uncovered, something the cartel had fought to keep hidden for years. What lay at the center of it all would change how authorities viewed the fight against organized crime forever. The day Nashville woke up to war. In the early hours of the morning, long before sunrise, Nashville was shaken awake by a terrifying chain of sounds. Helicopters thundered above, their bright searchlights cutting across rooftops and dark streets. Sirens wailed from every direction, blending into the sharp, urgent pounding on doors as tactical teams moved in. Families startled from their sleep and rushed to their windows, only to see heavily armed agents pouring into their neighborhoods. What had been quiet, familiar streets only hours earlier now looked like something out of a war zone. By the time the sun began to rise, the sheer scale of the operation was clear. Authorities confirmed that 17 people had been arrested, not just in Tennessee, but also in coordinated actions in California and Oklahoma. This was no small neighborhood gang. Those taken into custody were linked to MS-13, one of the most violent and feared criminal organizations in the world. According to officials, the group had been quietly running a highly organized network right inside Nashville, using the city as a key point for moving drugs, weapons, and money across the country. The raids also revealed how deeply this network had embedded itself into the community. Investigators reported that those arrested were not just low-level street dealers. Among them were suspected enforcers responsible for violence, distributors managing drug shipments, and trusted associates who handled cash and logistics. This wasn't a random sweep. It was a targeted strike designed to cripple the core of the operation in one decisive blow. For local residents, the experience was surreal and frightening. According to some accounts, it felt as if a military battle had erupted overnight. Neighbors peeked cautiously through blinds, watching agents go door to door, while parents held their children close, unsure of what danger might still be lurking. At first glance, it seemed to the public like a dramatic drug bust, the kind of operation that makes headlines for a few days before fading away. But officials quickly made it clear this was far more serious. The DEA was dismantling a cartel-linked network that had operated largely in secret. Their years of silence and secrecy were suddenly over. Yet beneath the flashing lights and chaotic images captured by the news, there was an even darker truth. The bust was only the final move in a long and silent battle, one that had been unfolding quietly for months. To truly understand how such a powerful network was able to grow unchecked in Nashville, we must step back and see how it all began, when investigators first started pulling the threads of a plan that would change everything. 9 months undercover. The dramatic raid that shook Nashville awake was not a last-minute plan or a lucky break. It was the result of 9 months of quiet, careful work carried out in total secrecy. During this time, federal agents built their case piece by piece, knowing that one wrong move could expose their efforts and allow the cartel-linked group to disappear. Their mission was not just to arrest a few gang members, but to completely dismantle an entire network operating across several states. According to reports, investigators relied on a wide range of tactics to gather evidence without alerting the suspects. Surveillance teams used hidden cameras and unmarked vehicles to track movements. Wiretaps were placed on phones to capture conversations. Undercover agents carried out controlled drug buys, posing as reliable buyers to gain the trust of low-level members. Each successful buy provided physical evidence while also revealing more about how the organization operated. Meanwhile, financial experts traced suspicious cash deposits and money transfers, looking for patterns that tied street-level activities to the higher-ups controlling the operation. As agents dug deeper, they began to see how disciplined and organized the cartel was. The group operated like a machine. Each member had a specific role. Some focused on smuggling, others on storage, others on distribution, and a separate group on enforcement and intimidation. The entire system was compartmentalized, meaning no one person had a full picture of the network. This strategy protected the leadership. Even if a street-level dealer was arrested, they could only reveal limited information, leaving the higher-ranking members safely in the shadows. This structure made the investigation incredibly difficult. Agents were forced to connect fragments of intelligence while keeping their presence completely hidden. According to reports, the cartel frequently changed its codes, burner phones, and meeting locations to avoid being tracked. Every new lead required agents to adapt quickly or risk losing their progress. By late summer, the investigation had reached a critical point. The DEA finally had enough evidence to act, but there was enormous pressure to get the timing right. Waiting too long could lead to leaks or give suspects time to destroy evidence and disappear. Moving too soon could leave parts of the network untouched, allowing them to rebuild. After weeks of careful planning, the decision was made to strike all key locations at once. The goal was to move faster than the cartel could react, cutting off every escape route and hitting the organization so hard that it could not recover. This bold plan set the stage for the explosive morning raid that would shock Nashville and reveal just how deeply this network had embedded itself in the city. The $500 million empire exposed. When the raids were over and the suspects were in custody, federal agents finally had the chance to step inside the safe houses and storage locations that had fueled the cartel's operation. What they found stopped even the most experienced investigators in their tracks. These were not small-scale drug stashes hidden in closets or under beds. They were full-blown distribution hubs, designed to move illegal products with the speed and precision of a legitimate business. Rows of crates were stacked high, packed tightly with a staggering variety of substances. According to officials, the seizures included massive amounts of marijuana, cocaine, counterfeit prescription pills, THC vapes, and even rare liquid psilocybin. These were not loose bags tossed together. Everything was carefully organized, labeled, and ready for shipment. The estimated total value reached $500 million. The number was so overwhelming that some agents reportedly took a moment just to absorb the scale of what they were seeing. It was the kind of operation more commonly found in international cartel strongholds, not in a city like Nashville. This was not street-level dealing. It was wholesale distribution on a massive scale. The volume of drugs indicated a network supplying other dealers who then spread the products into different cities and neighborhoods across multiple states. For every shipment seized that morning, investigators believed several others had already slipped through undetected, quietly reaching communities where they would destroy lives through addiction, overdoses, and violence. Each container represented thousands of doses ready to flood local streets. Alongside the drugs, agents uncovered a disturbing cache of weapons. There were military-style assault rifles fitted with high-capacity magazines, handguns with their serial numbers scratched off, and boxes of ammunition stacked in metal cases. According to reports, these weapons were not meant for simple defense. They were used to enforce loyalty within the network, intimidate rivals, and eliminate anyone who might threaten operations. The sheer amount of firepower suggested that this group had prepared for violent confrontations and was willing to fight for control of its territory. Then, there was the money, and plenty of it. Bundles of cash were discovered wrapped in plastic, sorted by amount, and marked with tags. These markings, according to investigators, pointed to a sophisticated laundering system. Each package of money was likely tracked and moved through a network of businesses and accounts to make it appear legitimate. This level of organization revealed that the group was not just running drugs. They were operating a complete financial machine that kept their empire alive. As agents walked through the warehouses and safe houses, a chilling realization set in. This was only one raid. If this much was uncovered in a single operation, what was still hidden? Some experts speculated that there could be an entire unseen infrastructure spread across multiple states, with higher-level figures directing everything from the shadows. The drugs, weapons, and money were only the surface, a visible layer of something far more powerful and complex. This raised a disturbing question that no one could ignore. Was this massive seizure truly a victory, or was it only the first glimpse of an empire much larger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined? To find out, investigators would have to look closely at the organization behind it all, the notorious MS-13, and uncover how they had managed to build such a vast, secretive network in the heart of Nashville. MS-13's grip on America. MS-13's story begins far from Nashville, decades before the recent raid. The gang was born in Los Angeles during the 1980s, formed by immigrants fleeing the brutal civil wars that tore apart countries like El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. Many of these young men grew up surrounded by chaos and death. Some had experience with weapons and combat long before they ever reached U.S. soil. When they arrived in America, they often landed in dangerous neighborhoods where survival depended on forming groups for protection. What started as a loose street gang quickly evolved into a structured and violent organization as the U.S. government began deporting gang members back to their home countries. The problem grew worse instead of disappearing. Each deportation sent hardened, connected, and violent individuals back to nations that were already unstable and struggling with weak law enforcement. According to reports, this created a cycle that strengthened MS-13 on two fronts. In Central America, the deported members built new factions, while in the United States, their remaining contacts continued to recruit and expand. Over the years, MS-13 grew into a transnational threat, linking cities and countries together through an underground web of crime, money, and fear. Today, MS-13 functions like a shadow government. It does not just commit crimes for profit, it rules communities through violence and intimidation. Their methods are notoriously brutal. Extortion is a constant source of income, with local businesses forced to pay for protection under threat of death. Kidnapping and human trafficking are also part of their operations, bringing in money and reinforcing control. Murder is routine, not only to punish betrayal, but to send a message to entire neighborhoods. Their chilling motto, Mata, Controla, Viola, which translates to kill, control, rape, is more than words. It is a code of conduct, a reminder to both members and civilians that MS-13's rule is absolute and without mercy. This climate of fear silences communities. In several U.S. cities, including Nashville, MS-13 blends into immigrant neighborhoods, making it difficult for police to track their activities without harming innocent residents. According to locals, people often stay silent even when they witness violence because they fear brutal retaliation against themselves or their families. This silence has allowed the gang to expand quietly and without drawing widespread attention. By the time the DEA finally moved in, MS-13's influence in Nashville had grown far beyond simple street crime. What was unfolding in the city was no longer just a local gang problem. It had become a dangerous national security issue, with tentacles stretching across state lines and even reaching into other countries. The evidence of their reach was undeniable, but it still left a pressing question hanging in the air. How could an organization this violent and far-reaching operate so quietly, staying almost invisible to the public eye? The answer would only be found by pulling back the curtain on the hidden network they had built to protect their empire. The hidden network. The cartel's operation in Nashville was not just powerful, it was invisible. According to investigators, this network was built over many years, with careful planning and constant adjustments to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. It was a living system that could change shape whenever it was threatened, making it extremely difficult to track. At its core, every part of the operation served a specific purpose, and one of the most critical was transportation. Without reliable ways to move drugs, weapons, and money, the entire network would collapse. For the cartel, transportation was not simply about moving product from one place to another. It was about doing it without anyone noticing. To accomplish this, they disguised their shipments to blend in perfectly with legitimate commerce. Drugs were hidden inside freight shipments that traveled along the same routes as everyday goods. Some were packed inside delivery trucks carrying groceries, furniture, or construction materials, while others were smuggled through rental vehicles that looked completely harmless in city traffic. At first glance, these vehicles were no different from thousands of others on the road. According to reports, drivers often carried fake invoices and delivery logs to make the shipments look completely official if they were ever stopped by police. This level of deception meant that even experienced officers had trouble knowing which vehicles to target without risking disruptions to real businesses. Safe houses added another layer of protection to the network. These locations were chosen with precision, often near highway exits to allow quick movement and escape if law enforcement got too close. From the outside, these houses appeared completely normal. They were nestled in quiet neighborhoods where families lived side by side, completely unaware of the danger so close to their homes. Some families later told authorities they were stunned to learn that a house just a few doors down had been storing large amounts of drugs, piles of cash, and dangerous weapons. Investigators reported that some safe houses were so advanced that they included escape tunnels or hidden rooms designed to hide evidence in case of a raid. The communication system was equally sophisticated. The group relied heavily on prepaid burner phones that were swapped out weekly to avoid tracking. Their conversations were layered with coded language. For example, a message about the weather clearing up could secretly mean a shipment had arrived safely, while a reference to a family gathering might signal a meeting or delivery. Even if someone overheard, it would sound like an innocent conversation. Recruitment was also tightly controlled. Some recruits were lured in with promises of money and status, while others were forced to join through threats and intimidation. According to reports, entire neighborhoods knew who held the power. Speaking out was seen as a death sentence, not only for the individual, but for their entire family. Over time, fear became just as valuable to the cartel as the cash moving through its hands. This system had been carefully refined over years, adapting every time law enforcement came close. Breaking through it would take more than luck or a single agency's effort. It would require multiple forces moving together like a single machine, ready to strike before the cartel even realized what was happening. The multi-agency strike team. From the very beginning, it was clear to the DEA that this operation was unlike anything they had faced before. The network they were tracking stretched across multiple states and involved far more than just drug trafficking. It touched weapons smuggling, cross-border movement, and large-scale financial crimes. According to officials, past attempts to go after similar groups had failed because no single agency could see the entire picture. Each group would only get a piece of the puzzle, and by the time they acted, the cartel had already shifted its operations. This time, failure was not an option. To succeed, law enforcement would need to form a united front and strike with perfect coordination. The DEA took the lead, but knew they needed other agencies to cover areas where their resources were limited. The FBI brought advanced cyber tools and intelligence gathering expertise. Their agents helped intercept encrypted text messages and map out hidden communication networks that were impossible to detect with traditional methods. A TF focused on the weapons side of the operation, tracing seized firearms back to their origins. In several cases, they were able to link rifles and pistols directly to gang members higher up in the chain of command. ICE handled the international elements, tracking how cartel members and shipments moved between the United States and Central America. Local law enforcement was just as important. The Metro Nashville Police Department gave investigators critical insight into the communities where MS-13 had been operating quietly. They identified neighborhoods that were at risk and provided intelligence that outsiders would have struggled to gather. This helped federal agents target the right locations while avoiding harm to innocent families. The U.S. Marshals Service handled high-risk arrests and fugitive captures, making sure that the most dangerous suspects had no chance to escape or fight back. According to reports, the planning sessions were intense. Maps covered the walls, and live intelligence updates were displayed on screens as agents worked late into the night. Secrecy was crucial. Everyone involved understood that even a single leak could destroy the entire operation. If the cartel caught wind of what was coming, they could destroy evidence, move their money, or disappear into the shadows. Every detail, from timing to location, had to be precise. On the day of the raid, timing was everything. Teams moved in simultaneously across Tennessee, California, and Oklahoma. At the exact same moment, doors were kicked in, helicopters circled overhead, and agents flooded the streets. The cartel had no time to react. There were no warning calls, no shipments moved to safety, and no evidence destroyed. The speed and coordination left the gang completely paralyzed. When agents finally breached these locations, what they found stunned even the most experienced among them. The scale of what they were looking at went far beyond what anyone had expected. Nashville was not just another stop on the cartel's map. It was becoming clear that the city might be serving as a central hub for U.S. operations. This realization left a chilling question hanging in the air. If Nashville was this deeply involved, how much more remained hidden across the country? The answer would soon come to light, and it would change the way everyone understood the scope of this threat. The big reveal: a hub of the U.S. cartel war. In the hours after the raid, as the chaos of the morning began to settle, a new and more meticulous phase of the operation began. Arrests had been made and locations were secured, but now came the most critical task: understanding exactly what had been uncovered. Trucks loaded with evidence from Tennessee, California, and Oklahoma arrived at secure facilities. Teams of specialists worked side by side, examining every item. It was a slow and exhausting process, but everyone involved knew that somewhere in this mountain of data lay the truth about what they had been fighting against. At first, many believed they were simply cataloging the results of a successful operation. Drugs, weapons, cash, and lists of suspects were logged and photographed. It felt like the aftermath of a major bust, the kind federal agents had seen before. But as the evidence was compared and connected, strange patterns began to emerge. Investigators started to realize that this was no ordinary gang cell. It was something far more advanced and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The turning point came when cyber units began digging into the digital devices seized during the raids. Dozens of phones, laptops, and encrypted drives were analyzed line by line. At first, the files seemed random. Numbers, short texts, and codes that made little sense. But as analysts pieced them together, they began to form a map. Identical codes were appearing across devices from different states. Repeated numbers linked to suspicious shipments. Slowly, a disturbing picture took shape. Nashville was not simply a pass-through city for cartel shipments. It was the point where drugs from the Southwest converged before being divided and redistributed across the East Coast and Midwest. Then came the financial evidence. Inside several of the safe houses, investigators found bundles of cash stacked in hidden compartments, each carefully marked with dates and codes. Alongside the cash were records of fake businesses that appeared completely legitimate from the outside. According to reports, some of these businesses had storefronts, employees, and even tax records. Neighbors would have had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. In reality, these fronts existed solely to move cartel profits through the financial system without detection. Investigators believe millions of dollars flowed through these operations each month, blending illegal money with legitimate revenue in a way that made it almost impossible to trace. The most shocking discovery came when this financial information was matched with intercepted communications. At first, these messages seemed harmless, like routine conversations about schedules or deliveries. But when compared with the ledger codes and digital records, their true meaning was revealed. Nashville was not just storing drugs or hiding money, it was giving orders. Instructions were sent to crews operating hundreds of miles away, dictating shipment routes, payment schedules, and even when to use violence to maintain control. What had seemed like a local gang operation was actually a command center, directing a network that stretched across multiple states. The discovery was both a victory and a warning. If a network of this scale could grow quietly in Tennessee, how many other cities might be hiding similar operations? For every hub dismantled, others could still be running silently, ready to take its place. The raid had ended, but the larger war was only beginning. Even as agents celebrated their success, they understood that what they had uncovered was only a piece of a much bigger fight, one that was far from over. The aftermath and what comes next. In the days following the massive raid, a wave of emotion swept through Nashville and the surrounding communities. Relief was the most immediate feeling. After months of fear and silence, many residents felt as though a heavy weight had been lifted. Streets that had once been dominated by whispers of MS-13 activity now seemed safer. Families could walk outside without constantly looking over their shoulders. But that relief was quickly tempered by unease. According to locals, there were quiet worries that the sudden power vacuum could lead to more violence. Some feared that rival gangs might try to move in and claim the territory that MS-13 had lost. Others wondered if scattered members of the busted network might regroup and retaliate. These fears prompted the DEA and local law enforcement to maintain an aggressive presence. Patrols were increased, checkpoints were established, and community meetings were held to reassure residents that they would not be left vulnerable. The bust also emboldened victims and witnesses. Families who had lived under the gang's control cautiously came forward, sharing stories of intimidation and extortion that had kept them silent for years. Some local businesses provided evidence of forced payments and laundering schemes, information they had been too afraid to report before. Despite these victories, analysts warned that the fight was far from over. Cartels are known to adapt quickly, routes can shift overnight, and new leaders can rise to replace those who were arrested. There were concerns that the raid, while a major blow, had also revealed how much law enforcement now understood about the network. According to some experts, this knowledge might push the cartel to evolve its tactics, making future investigations even more difficult. As Tennessee begins to rebuild, the map of cartel activity is already shifting. The next flashpoint may be forming somewhere else, silently preparing to challenge everything that was achieved in Nashville.